He sat at the head of the table like he always did. Commanding. Confident. The kind of man who fills a room without trying. Without even meaning to. His attorney was positioned to his left, folder already open to the signature page. A glass of water had been placed in front of Maya, as though someone had anticipated she might need it. And Maya Chen sat across from him, pen in hand, trying to figure out why her stomach felt like she'd swallowed something cold and heavy. She trusted Daniel Hargrove. She had trusted him for 6 years. And that was the first mistake. The thing about Daniel Hargrove is that he was extraordinarily good at being trusted. He had built an empire on it. Hargrove Capital Management controlled over $3 billion in assets under management. He had offices in Manhattan, London, and Chicago. His name was etched into the side of a hospital wing in New Jersey and carved into a scholarship endowment at the university where he'd gotten his first degree. He gave keynote speeches at financial conferences where tickets alone cost $1,500, and people paid it gladly just to sit in the audience and absorb whatever wisdom he let fall from his mouth. He was, by every visible and measurable standard, one of the most respected men in American finance. And Maya had believed it. She believed it completely. She believed it when he hired her straight out of her MBA program at a time when most of her classmates were desperately competing for entry-level positions. She believed it when he personally mentored her, not in the performative way executives perform mentorship, but in the real, unglamorous, 3 hours on a Sunday kind of way. She believed it when he promoted her to senior portfolio analyst at 31, the youngest person in the firm's history to hold that title. She believed it the night her father died and Daniel Hargrove flew back from a conference in London, drove directly from the airport, and sat in the second row at the funeral service. He shook her hand afterward and said, "You are one of the most exceptional people I have ever had the privilege of knowing." 6 years. 6 years of trust. 6 years of loyalty. 6 years of believing, with total certainty, that she was standing on the right side of the right man. She picked up the pen, and that is exactly where our story begins. Maya Chen had grown up in a household that treated numbers like a second language. Her father was an accountant. Her mother kept meticulous records of every household expense in a ledger she updated every Sunday morning with a cup of tea at the kitchen table. Maya had inherited both the discipline and the instinct. By the time she was 26, she could read a financial statement the way most people read a novel, naturally, fluently, and with an immediate sense for when something wasn't adding up. That instinct, as it turned out, was going to become the most dangerous thing she owned. It started on a Tuesday in early November. Maya was running a quarterly audit of the Meridian Client Group, a portfolio of 63 accounts, all of them high-net-worth elderly clients. Most of them retirees who had moved their savings to Hargrove Capital based on the firm's long-standing reputation for conservative, reliable growth. Good people. Trust fund grandparents. Former teachers and engineers and small business owners who had spent their lives building a nest egg and then handed it to Daniel Hargrove to protect. Maya was 3 hours into the audit when she found something that didn't make sense. A series of management fees, quarterly charges to the Meridian accounts, that weren't appearing in the client-facing statements. The internal records showed the fees. The client summaries did not. The gap wasn't enormous at first glance. Not the kind of number that would make someone gasp. But Maya had a gift for patterns, and the pattern here was unmistakable. These fees had been assessed quietly, consistently, and invisibly for what appeared to be at least 3 years. She leaned back in her chair. She stared at the screen. She told herself it was a system error. A reconciliation issue between the internal and external reporting software. These things happened. She'd seen them before. She flagged it, documented it, and sent it directly to Daniel. His response came in 20 minutes. "Great catch. I'll get accounting to look at this. Appreciate your diligence." She exhaled. Of course. A system error. Daniel was on it. She should have paid more attention to how quickly he responded. The meeting request came the following morning at 8:47. "Please come to conference room A at 10. Routine contract update. New firm-wide confidentiality refresh. Shouldn't take more than 20 minutes. Maya arrived to find Daniel already seated, his attorney Richard Solt across from him, and a document roughly 40 pages thick sitting on the table. Richard smiled. Daniel smiled. Everything felt perfectly normal. Daniel explained that the firm's legal team had updated the standard employee confidentiality framework to align with some new regulatory language. Something about data privacy compliance. Something about client information protocols. Standard stuff. He apologized for the dry administrative necessity of it. Maya flipped to page 2 and began to read. Richard gently interrupted. "We've flagged the key sections for you. Most of it's boilerplate, honestly. We just need a signature on page 41 to stay current with the new filings." Daniel's phone rang. He glanced at it and looked up at Maya. "You mind if I grab this?" 2 minutes. He stood, left the room. Richard said, "Take your time." "Water?" Maya nodded. Richard stepped out to the small credenza near the door. She had her head down, reading. She was on page 9. The language was dense. Legal. She was moving through it as carefully as she could. Richard brought the water over, set it beside her. She didn't look up. And that was the moment she didn't know she would replay in her mind, over and over, for the next 14 months. Because in that moment, without her seeing it, Richard Solt opened his briefcase, retrieved a second document, and placed it precisely beneath the one Maya was reading. When Daniel walked back into the room exactly 3 minutes and 40 seconds later, he was warm, apologetic, and gently steered the conversation toward conclusion. Maya signed on page 41. She thought she was signing a confidentiality refresh. She had actually signed a document that contained language on page 31, language that had not existed in the version she had been reading, barring her from reporting any internal financial irregularities to any regulatory body, including the SEC, FINRA, or the Department of Justice, without prior written consent from Hargrove Capital's executive leadership. She had just legally muzzled herself. She just didn't know it yet. Exactly 19 days later, Maya was called into Daniel's office at 4:30 in the afternoon. His tone was warm, almost tender. He told her the firm was restructuring the analytics division. Her position was being eliminated. He was deeply sorry. He valued her enormously. He hoped she knew that. Her severance package was generous. 6 months of full pay, continued benefits, and a glowing letter of recommendation that he had personally drafted. He slid an envelope across the desk. She was too stunned to speak. 6 years. He was looking at her the way you look at someone you're about to forget. She took the envelope home. She couldn't eat dinner. She sat at her kitchen table and opened it. Inside was the severance agreement. 12 pages. On page 7, buried in a paragraph about final compensation, was language explicitly reaffirming the confidentiality agreement she had signed 19 days earlier. Something shifted in Maya's chest. Not grief. Something colder. She called her attorney the next morning. His name was Philip Garrett. She had hired him 3 years earlier to review a lease agreement. He was thorough, careful, and honest to the point of sometimes being unkind about it. He read the NDA she had signed over the course of 2 days and called her back on a Thursday evening. His voice was quiet. He said, "Maya, I have to be straight with you. This document, and the severance reaffirmation, has been structured very, very deliberately. The language on page 31 is not standard. It's been specifically crafted to prevent you from reporting anything you may have observed regarding client account irregularities. If you go to the SEC, the firm can sue you for breach of this agreement. We're talking about a clause that carries a $2 million liquidated damages provision." Silence on the line. "If you sign the severance," he continued, "you're accepting the money in exchange for staying silent. If you don't sign, you lose the severance, but you might still be bound by the original NDA depending on how it's argued. Either way, fighting this in court would cost you money you don't have against a firm with lawyers who charge what you used to make in a year." Maya sat with that for a long time. Then she asked, "What did I actually sign, Philip?" Another pause. Then, honestly, "I'm not sure. This doesn't look like a standard confidentiality refresh. Some of this language looks like it was written for a very specific purpose." She asked him what that specific purpose might be. He said, "To make sure that whatever you saw in those Meridian accounts stays buried." She didn't sleep that night, or the night after. The weeks that followed were the worst of Maya's life in ways she hadn't been prepared for. The professional damage happened almost instantly. Finance is a relationship industry, and word moves like smoke. You never see it traveling. You just suddenly smell it everywhere. She wasn't getting calls back. 3 firms she interviewed with cited cultural fit, and then went silent. A former colleague she'd trained personally stopped responding to her messages. Someone she'd considered a friend told her, over coffee, "Maya, I don't know what happened over there, but I'd keep a low profile if I were you. People are saying things." She did not sign the severance agreement. She also could not afford Philip to fight the NDA. She sat in her apartment and watched her savings account move in one direction. She thought about her mother, whose medical bills Maya had helped carry for the last 3 years. She thought about the Meridian clients, retirees she had never met, whose savings were being quietly drained while their statements told them everything was fine. She thought about Daniel Hargrove in the second row at her father's funeral. She opened her laptop and she started building a file. Not to use yet. She didn't know what she would do with it. She just needed to do something other than feel helpless. She reconstructed from memory everything she had seen in the Meridian accounts. She searched public filings for any trace of the irregularities. She documented the timeline of the NDA meeting, the signing, the termination. She wrote down every detail she could remember about who was in the room and what was said. And then, on a Wednesday morning 11 months after she'd been let go, an email arrived in her inbox from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "I was in the room too." The sender's name was Elaine Marsh. Maya had to think for a moment before the face came to her. Then it did. A woman in her late 50s, quietly efficient, always moving through Hargrove Capital's executive floor with a sense of purposeful invisibility. The kind of person who refilled the coffee and straightened the conference room materials, and whose last name you probably wouldn't have been able to recall on a Tuesday morning if your life depended on it. Elaine had been with the firm for 11 years. She managed the catering for board dinners. She coordinated Richard Salt's calendar. She had been in conference room A when Maya signed the NDA. She had brought in the water. The email was short. It said, "I know what happened in that room. I know what they did. I can't talk by phone. Can you meet me in person? Somewhere public. No devices." Maya stared at the email for 22 minutes. Then she replied with one word. "Yes." They met at a diner outside of Newark on a Friday afternoon. Elaine was already in a corner booth when Maya arrived, both hands wrapped around a coffee mug, wearing a jacket that was slightly too big for her. She looked like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and wasn't sure how to put it down. Maya sat across from her. Elaine said, "You need to understand something about me before I tell you anything. I am not doing this because I'm brave. I'm doing this because I've run out of options." Then she reached into her jacket pocket and placed a flash drive on the table between them. Maya looked at it, then at Elaine. "What's on this?" Elaine said, 2 years of recordings. Here is what Elaine Marsh had done, quietly and without telling anyone. Approximately 2 years before Maya's termination, a senior partner at Hargrove Capital had begun directing comments toward Elaine. Comments about her appearance, about her age, about what she would be willing to do to keep her job past 60. Elaine had gone to HR. HR had told her the partner was going through a difficult time personally, and that they appreciated her patience. She had gone back to HR 3 months later. She was told to submit a written form and that it would be reviewed at the next quarterly meeting. Elaine had a daughter in college and a mortgage. She could not afford to lose her job. She could not afford a lawsuit. But she also was not willing to be unprotected. So she purchased a small digital recorder. And she began documenting. She was thorough. She was methodical. She recorded in conference rooms, in hallways, in the executive assistant area outside Daniel's office where conversations spilled out through improperly closed doors. She was not doing it to build a case against Daniel Hargrove. She was doing it to protect herself from a man who worked 2 floors below him. But in 2 years of recording, she had captured a great deal more than she had set out to. She had captured Richard Salt, 2 days before Maya's NDA meeting, saying to Daniel, "The document swap needs to happen during a natural break. We send her out of the room. I do the exchange. She comes back. She never reads page 31. She had captured Daniel responding, "She's too smart to rush. Let her think she's being thorough. Just make sure the copy she reads and the copy she signs are different documents." She had captured Daniel, 3 days after Maya signed, saying to his chief of staff, "She saw the Meridian accounts. She won't talk now. Make sure she gets the termination offer before she starts thinking too hard." And she had captured something else. Something that made Maya's attorney go completely still when he heard it. Philip Garrett listened to the recordings for 4 hours. Then he called Maya and asked her to come into his office the following morning. He was already there when she arrived, coffee untouched, eyes focused. He said, "Maya, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What Elaine has given you isn't just evidence of fraud. It's evidence that the NDA itself was procured through criminal deception. The document you signed is not the document you were shown. You were deliberately misled about the nature and content of a legal instrument while you were signing it. In law, that's called fraudulent inducement." Maya nodded. She already knew that part. Philip held up one hand. "But there's more. And this is the part that changes everything. An NDA that is used as an instrument of a crime, not just one that happens to cover a crime, is void. Not voidable on a technicality. Void. Unenforceable from the moment you signed it. It has no legal standing because its entire purpose was to facilitate ongoing criminal activity. The courts have been increasingly clear on this. And what Daniel and Richard Solt were caught saying on tape. Those recordings establish beyond any reasonable doubt that this NDA was created with criminal intent and executed through fraud." The room was quiet. He thought the NDA protected him, Philip said. He forgot about the witness. He forgot about the witness. What happened over the following 6 weeks moved faster than Maya had believed possible. Philip contacted a former colleague now working as a whistleblower attorney in Washington, D.C. A referral was made. A call was placed. And within 10 days, Maya Chun was sitting across the table from 2 investigators from the Securities and Exchange Commission's Enforcement Division. She brought everything. The reconstructed Meridian account discrepancies. Elaine's recordings. The original version of the NDA she had been reading before the swap versus the version she had signed. 2 documents which Elaine had photographed side by side in the conference room moments after the meeting ended, not knowing then exactly what she had witnessed but sensing, with the particular radar of a woman who had been dismissed her entire career, that something wrong had just happened. The investigators asked questions for 4 hours. They were professional and almost completely unreadable. One of them, as Maya was preparing to leave, looked up from his notepad and said, "Ms. Chun, how long did you say you worked with the Meridian accounts?" "I ran the quarterly audit for 3 years, she said. He wrote something down. 3 months later, Hargrove Capital's offices were served with a federal civil investigative subpoena. Daniel Hargrove was in the middle of a board dinner in Chicago when he received the call from his general counsel. By every account from people present that evening, the color left his face in a way that was difficult to describe. One board member later recalled that it looked less like shock and more like recognition. The look of a man who had known, somewhere deep and quiet, that a specific door was going to open someday. He just hadn't known who would be standing on the other side of it. He flew back to New York that night. What the SEC investigation uncovered over the next several months was both meticulous and devastating. The Meridian accounts had been subjected to what investigators described as a systematic extraction scheme. Unauthorized management fees assessed at a rate that exceeded what was disclosed to clients, processed through a secondary internal billing code that did not appear on any client-facing statement. 340 clients. 6 years. $47 million. These were people who had trusted Daniel Hargrove with the money it had taken them a lifetime to accumulate. And here was the twist that broke open the entire case in a way nobody, not even Maya, had anticipated. When investigators began pulling employee records, they found 3 additional former Hargrove Capital employees who had been terminated in the years prior to Maya, each of whom had signed a confidentiality agreement at the time of their separation. 3 people who had separately flagged irregularities in client accounts and been quietly removed. 3 NDAs that had silenced 3 people for years. Philip called Maya on a Tuesday morning to tell her. He said, based on the recordings and the fraudulent inducement argument, the attorneys for the other 3 individuals are now filing motions to void their NDAs under the same legal theory. One criminal scheme for suppressed witnesses. The entire legal structure Daniel built to protect himself is collapsing simultaneously. Maya sat with that for a long moment. She thought about how long those 3 people had been carrying their silence. How many of them had been told, as she had been, that there was nothing they could do. How many careers had quietly unraveled. How many nights spent staring at financial records they couldn't discuss with anyone. She thought about a system of power built on the assumption that ordinary people, afraid and alone, would eventually give up. Richard Solt cooperated with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced charge. His testimony confirmed the document swap in granular, excruciating detail. He described the preparation of the alternate document, the timing of Daniel's exit from the conference room, the sequence of the exchange. He described his own role without apparent emotion, the way a person describes something they had made peace with long before they were ever caught. He also confirmed that Daniel had been aware of the Meridian billing discrepancies not for weeks or months, but for the entire 6 years they had existed. He had not only known, he had designed the system. Daniel Hargrove entered a guilty plea 11 months after the SEC subpoena. Securities fraud, obstruction of justice, wire fraud. The sentencing hearing drew coverage from financial press on 3 continents. The judge, before announcing the sentence, read aloud from a victim impact statement submitted by a 74-year-old retired schoolteacher from Connecticut named Helen Briggs, who had lost nearly $200,000, most of her retirement savings, to the Meridian scheme. Helen did not appear in person. She had submitted her statement from a hospital room where she was being treated for a condition her family privately attributed, in part, to the financial stress of the preceding year. Her statement described what it felt like to open an account statement that told you everything was fine and to believe it, because you had no reason not to, because you had trusted a man who seemed to deserve it. The judge sentenced Daniel Hargrove to 11 years in federal prison. The $47 million, recovered through asset seizure and civil litigation, was distributed back to the Meridian clients. Every one of the 340 accounts was made whole. Myachin opened a financial advisory practice in Philadelphia 18 months after the SEC investigation concluded. She called it Meridian Advisory Group, deliberately, unmistakably. She specialized in financial planning and asset management for retirees, with a particular emphasis on fee transparency and client education. Within 2 years, she had 40 clients. Within 4, over 100. She had built something that looked, in its values, like the exact inverse of everything Daniel Hargrove had constructed. She was asked, once, in an interview with a financial trade publication, what she thought Daniel had believed when he forced her to sign that NDA. She thought about it for a moment. I think he believed that a legal document was the same thing as power, she said. That if you could make something official, stamp it, bind it, force someone's signature onto it, you controlled reality. He believed in paper the way other people believe in walls. He thought if you built the wall high enough, nothing could come over it. The interviewer asked what had brought the wall down. Maya said, he forgot that walls only work if everyone outside them is alone. The moment Elaine and I were in the same room, the wall was already finished. Elaine Marsh retired at 61 with a whistleblower award from the SEC, a financial payment calibrated to a percentage of the penalties collected from the Hargrove capital enforcement action. The amount was not publicly disclosed. She bought a house on the Jersey Shore and, by her own description, spent her mornings drinking coffee and watching the water. She had spent 11 years at Hargrove Capital being invisible, being efficient and quiet and easily overlooked, being the woman who brought the water into the conference room and whose presence no one registered, because no one had ever thought to register it. Daniel Hargrove had stood in that conference room while his attorney swapped 2 legal documents, and while the woman who would one day destroy his entire empire stood 3 feet away, placing a glass of water on the table. He had looked right through her. He had seen furniture. He had forgotten about the witness because he had never really seen her at all. That is the nature of certain kinds of power. It requires you to stop seeing people. And the moment you stop seeing people, you stop accounting for them. And the moment you stop accounting for them, they become the thing you never saw coming. Elaine Marsh walked out of that building for the last time carrying 11 years of recordings and a complete understanding of what powerful men consistently forget, that the people they dismiss are still watching, that the room is never as empty as it feels, that the water being placed on the table has hands attached to it, and behind those hands is a mind that has been paying attention to every single thing. He thought the NDA protected him. He forgot about the witness. He forgot that the most dangerous person in any room is the one that no one thinks to be afraid of.